Hello everyone, welcome to Aptiplus Academy for Civil Services. In this session, we are going to discuss the topics that were in news in the last week of August. So let's get started. Our first topic is of course GST, but before we begin, let's have a look at this question that appeared in UPSC Prelims 2018. As you can see here, 4 items have been listed and the question has asked which of the above are exempted under GST. Hulled cereal grains, chicken, eggs, cooked, fish, processed and canned, and newspapers containing advertising material. Well, here the answer would be C, 1, 2 and 4, because fish and processed canned, they carry a GST of 5%. But here the motive is to understand the type of questions that are asked in UPSC prelims. We have observed that UPSC of course repeats the pattern of questions that are asked in prelims. So we need to go through the previous year's questions properly. And here comes the relevance of the new GST rates that were released recently. So first topic is 56th meeting of the GST Council. So recently, the 56th meeting of the GST Council was held in New Delhi under the chairpersonship of Union Finance Minister Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, of course. So let's understand this. So what were the key recommendations of the council meeting this time? So first one, of course, rate rationalization. Okay, it moved from a 4-tier slab into a 2-tier system that would be effective from 22nd September 2025. So earlier, what were the GST rates, the slabs? Okay, so 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%, and now it has moved to a 2-tier system, okay, where only 2 slabs would be applicable. One is 5%, the other is 18%, and of course there is something else for some select items where 40% tax would be levied. So the first one is the merit rate, okay, 5%, of course. It covers essential goods, okay, to reduce costs for the common man. Then comes the standard rate of 18%, okay. It applies to the non-essential items for something called revenue stability, which means that of course the government can't go ahead with a single rate of GST and it needs revenue to stabilize its finances, and which is why the 18% rate also applies. So what has happened basically? Earlier the old structure was for essential goods, the rate was 5% to 12%, and this has been rationalized, simplified to 5% merit rate, and then it is followed by standard items like earlier 12 to 18% was applied, and now only 18% is applied, which means it has been rationalized again. And then for luxury and sin goods, okay, earlier 28% was applied and now 40% would be applied for these demerit goods, okay. So basically it has been increased. It's important to note that this simplified tax system is inspired from systems in Australia and Canada, okay, because they have fewer slabs and this enhances what? Predictability in the market. So what are the new GST rates on various items now? It's important to note in the first place that a number of goods have been exempted from GST, a number of services as well, and the most important among them is the insurance policies, okay, the mediclaims and all. So it's exempted from GST right now completely, and also the insurance policies like term insurance, ULIP, then endowments and all, okay. Also the reinsurance, etc., they are now GST exempt because this will promote affordability and coverage expansion. Also we all know about the out-of-pocket expenditure in medical expenses in India, and because of which a lot of people, they slip into poverty only because of the huge medical expenses that happens in India. And earlier in insurances and mediclaims also 18% GST used to be applied. Now this has been reduced, not just reduced, but it has been exempted completely, which is a landmark decision this time. Apart from this, no GST would be applied on UHT milk, that is ultra high temperature milk. Okay, what is UHT milk? It is basically a milk that has been processed using ultra high temperatures treatment, a process where milk is heated to at least 135 degrees centigrade for a few seconds, okay, in order to kill all the microorganisms, of course, and this makes it safe for long-term storage at room temperature and sterile packaging. Of course, the Tetra Pak cartons, okay, of milk which we buy. So UHT milk is now exempt from GST. Then no GST would be applicable on chena and paneer. Please note that we are talking about pre-packaged paneer, okay? Paneer that has not been packaged, not the packaged ones. So pre-packaged paneer would not carry any GST, okay, anymore. Earlier 5% GST used to be applied on it. Then certain Indian breads would not carry any GST. For instance, roti, chapati, paratha, pizza bread, etc. Then certain educational services, okay, like tuition and coaching up to class 12, they're also like exempt under the GST regime. And if we talk about charitable hospitals, trust services, of course, no GST would be applied for them. Vocational training and skill development, very important because India is struggling with the skill gap, right now, and these are exempt from GST. There are certain like paper products like paper, cork, textiles, floor coverings. They'll carry a GST of 0 to 5%. It will depend upon the specificity of the product. Earlier 12 to 18% of GST was applied on them. Apart from them, if we talk about certain items like drinking water, earlier 12% GST was applied on it. Now it will be 5%. Fruit juices 12% to 5%. Okay. Cement 28% was applied on it, and now only 18% would be applied on it. Now the thing is, we cannot like talk about each and every product over here. We have tried to discuss the most important ones, okay, the items which are like now exempt from GST, and certain items, they have been like rationalized, the rates have been rationalized. Of course, you need to go through all the products properly, so that if they try to give you a list of certain items and ask you regarding the rates, you can solve the question. Please note that these GST reforms come at a time when the US has applied tariff of 50% on India, and this is going to affect our exports and other sectors like textile and apparel very badly. That is why these economic reforms are very significant in this context at this time, because we need to like bring reforms that can absorb the shocks, external shocks that are occurring because of these tariffs, and also India needs to be self-reliant and move towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, what will be the impact of these GST reforms? The first one is, of course, the economic boost. Okay, so according to a State Bank of India report, okay, because of this GST reform, along with the income tax cuts that occurred, where annual income up to 12% will be exempt from income tax. Okay, so both of these, okay, they could actually increase the household disposable income by 5.31 lakh crore, which is equivalent to around 1.6% of GDP. So this is going to be very significant, and as they go hand in hand, and also the lowering of the GST rates on essential goods, consumer products and vehicles, they are going to have a big impact on our economy. The next one is global reliance. Okay, so strong domestic market, of course, it reduces the reliance on external trade that we were talking about a few minutes back. It counters the global shocks like the US tariffs. Then simplified compliance, because the two-tier structure, it minimizes the disputes and it also enhances the predictability, right? It aligns with the global models like the Australia's GST, where also they're like two-tier structure. So if there are like more slabs, it complicates the things, and if there's a dispute regarding those things between two parties, it will be very complicated, and that is why we need to simplify the entire taxation process. These reforms will not only enhance the ease of doing business, but they'll also increase the competitiveness of the micro, small and medium enterprises. Okay, And this time this was a sign of cooperative federalism, because all the states, they gave their consent to the GST Council's decision. So this was a consensus driven approach, and there were all the states, they were on the same page, they participated, though there are a lot of challenges, we all know, and these challenges persist due to revenue concerns and states complaints against the center regarding the revenue distribution and all. Okay, if we talk about the sectoral impact, so of course the MSMEs, they gain from it, and also the manufacturing and the retail sectors, they also benefit from the rationalization of the GST. Now, what are the challenges with the GST reforms? Okay, so number one is revenue shortfall, because state would definitely face an estimated 48,000 crores to 93,000 crores annual revenue loss, and states like Jharkhand will lose around 2,000 crores, and Jammu and Kashmir will see a reduction of around 10 to 12% of its revenue. So because since the rates have been decreased, they have been rationalized, so the amount that goes to states, it will definitely get affected. The second one is the resistance of the states, because there are certain opposition ruled states, example in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, they demand compensation, okay, because they fear that it will put a fiscal strain on social programs, on the schemes that are going on a continuous basis. Then the third one is a lagged impact. What is that? Actually, when we are reducing the GST rates, of course, the benefits would be there, but it would take time, because consumption benefits takes time. But the tariff shocks, okay, they hit immediately. If we talk about the US tariffs, for instance, the repercussions would be immediate. It would be having an immediate effect on our exports, on our economy. Okay, so of course, there will be an impact on the short-term economic state of the country, and the GST reforms will definitely give benefits, but it would be a long-term game. So this is the another challenge. Now, what is the way forward for effective implementation of these reforms? Okay, number one is compensation framework, because we need to develop a phased revenue sharing model or a transitional loan mechanism, because we need to stabilize the finances of the state. Also, there needs to be a fiscal support to the exporters and the MSMEs, because we need to bridge the lag that we were talking about in terms of consumption benefits. Okay, we can also pursue new free trade agreements with different countries, because we would like to enhance our market access that aligns with the goals of Make in India. We also need to combine the GST reforms with the trade and the industrial policies that are in place for resilience and competitiveness, right? And if we enhance the digital infrastructure, if we strengthen it, for instance, the GSTN portal, it will lead to a seamless experience for filing returns and all for all the people. Regarding the various guidelines also, they need to be clear for emerging sectors like the drones and the e-commerce, because in that way there will be reduction in litigation, there will be reduction in court cases. For this, we can learn from the Singapore's model of real-time tax clarification. So there's no room for long-term court cases and litigation. So of course we can learn from countries like Singapore. And finally, we need to launch campaigns to educate the MSMEs on the simplified compliance and the new rules. Right. In conclusion, we can say that the GST reforms, they represent a bold step towards simplifying India's tax regime with a clear focus on boosting consumption, and it also eases the burden on ordinary citizens and businesses. And now the success of it will definitely depend upon timely execution. And if the businesses pass on the benefits to the people, that would be a win-win situation. Moving to the next topic, compensation cess for states. So what is the context? Basically, states are now demanding to extend the compensation cess. Okay, so this is because the new GST reforms, they are in place and they aim to simplify the tax structure, but they are also expected to result in a short-term drop in revenue for states, and that is why the states are demanding for extension of the compensation cess now. Now let's understand what is GST compensation cess. So GST compensation cess is a special tax a special tax created under the GST system in India. It is charged on certain products to help states recover any loss that is caused by the GST rollout. We all know that the GST was rolled out in 2017, 1st July, right? So since then only this compensation cess is in place. The main goal of this compensation cess is to cover any revenue losses that states may experience while they are moving from what? The old tax, indirect tax system to the GST system. So this is because when the entire system, the tax structure was changed from the indirect tax system, okay, from the VAT to GST, a lot of rules got changed, and as a result the source of revenue for the states got affected. And now also when there is a change in the rates of the various products and items and there is a rationalization of rates, there will be of course an effect on the source of revenue for the various states. So since 2017 only this GST compensation cess is in place, and the main goal of the compensation cess is to cover these revenue losses, okay, which the states are experiencing when they are moving from an old system to the new system. And the money which is collected from this cess is used to support states to ensure that they do not suffer financially due to this change. Now on which items these like this particular cess is applied to? Basically items like tobacco, coal, soft drinks, luxury cars, etc. Now the GST Council, which includes the members from both the central and the state governments, it decides how the cess is applied and shared among states. Okay. Now before we dig deeper, you have to understand what is a cess in general. Okay, so cess is a form of tax that is levied by the government on taxpayers over and above their existing tax liability, and this is for a specific purpose. For instance, we are already paying what? We are already paying the direct tax. This is on our income, okay. Then indirect tax. Where is it going? This indirect tax, it is in the form of like various goods and services, etc. We are paying indirect taxes when we are availing those things. And finally, when we are talking about cess, this falls neither under direct or indirect tax, but it is a separate special tax which is levied by the government on taxpayers, and this is above and over the existing tax liability, and usually this cess is for a specific purpose. So unlike general tax revenues which the government can use for any purpose, the funds that are collected from a cess, they're reserved for a designated goal, okay, for a particular thing that is reserved. And this cess is also discontinued once the government raises the required funds for its intended purpose. And please note that the central government is not legally obliged. The central government is not legally obliged or legally required to share cess proceeds with state governments. This is the general concept of cess. But when we are talking about the compensation cess, okay, GST compensation cess, it is a different thing altogether. Here the purpose is only to compensate the states. So of course the amount that will, the revenue that will be generated from this will go to states, okay, it will be divided among the states. So as mentioned earlier, the products that currently fall under GST compensation cess, they are tobacco products and substitutes, the sin goods, okay, apart from that pan masala, yes, coal, then solid fuels from coal and lignite and peat, which are like a form of coal, then aerated waters, luxury cars and motorcycles which have engine capacity exceeding 350 cc. This is there, and other aircraft, for instance helicopters, aeroplanes, okay, for personal use, yacht and vessels for pleasure or sports, and some specified goods that are under the GST regime. So these are the products that currently fall under the GST compensation cess. Now there is a formula, okay, of this compensation cess. How is it calculated states tax revenue from the financial year 2015 to 2016. Okay, so this basically serves as the benchmark. So whatever was the revenue of the state, okay, of a particular state in 2015-16, it acts as the benchmark. Now the central government, it assumes that there will be a 14% annual growth, 14% annual growth rate on the base revenue for each financial year. For instance, in 2015-16, if it was 100 rupees, just to give you an example, then in 2016-17, there will be a growth of 14% on it, which will be 114 rupees. Again, in 2017-18, it will be increased by 14%. So, 114, okay, plus 14%. So, in this way, there will be an increase in the revenue of this state's assumption. Standard, that is the standard. Usually this should have happened, but because of the transition to GST, this might not have happened, and that is why here comes the compensation cess. Okay, clear? So actual GST revenue collected by a state is then subtracted from its projected revenue. If the actual revenue is lower, then the central government compensates the state for the shortfall. That is the entire mechanism. Initially, this was introduced, the compensation system was introduced for 5 years, and it was supposed to end by 2022. However, it was extended to March 2026, mainly because it needed to repay the 2.69 lakh crore loans that were taken during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay. So this was the reason for the extension. Now the government plans to end the cess collection, okay, by October 2025, 31st October 2025. But now the states are again demanding for the extension of the compensation cess, because there's been a reduction and the rationalization in the rates of the GST. Also, there is an issue regarding the uneven revenue impact on states, because GST revenue distribution is not equal among states, and thus there will be an impact of tax cuts. Okay, for instance, if we talk about Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, these are like strong urban centers which have manufacturing and service related activities, and they will definitely experience a big hit due to their immediate GST revenue collection. Because why is it so? Because if GST is reduced on appliances or electronics or goods like this, since these are the manufacturing states, the immediate revenue collection from GST for these states would take a visible hit. On the other hand, if we talk about Bihar or UP, these states may not experience revenue dent, because their consumption basket mainly comprises of essentials, and these essentials are already exempted because of course we all know that paratha and all those things, they are exempted under GST. Also, a lot of relief has been given for the agricultural sector as well, okay, tractors and etc. So reduction in the GST rates pertaining to agricultural sector. So of course they will not be affected much. So smaller, less industrialized states, they receive a negligible share of total GST collections. That is also another issue. So these are the challenges that are going on right now, but we have to understand that this compensation cess system, it cannot go on like forever and ever, because the states, they need to strengthen their fiscal autonomy. Okay, they must prioritize developing self-sufficient revenue generation systems. For that, they need to improve internal tax administration, plug leakages, and broaden their tax base as well. Okay, also they need to actively attract investments. And number of states, for instance, in West Bengal itself, more than 2200 companies, they left the state. So, and a lot of companies are not investing also. So these are the issues that the states need to address. Also, we need to adopt next generation GST reforms strategically, because the simplified two slab GST structure, which is like the 5% and the 18%, it is very good. It enhances affordability, it boosts consumption, it reduces the classification disputes, and it improves the ease of doing business. And states need to understand the long-term economic benefits, okay, and they need to collaborate with the center for successful implementation. Also, there needs to be like equitable revenue distribution from the end of the centers. So the GST Council, it must address the unequal impact of GST revenue distribution and rate changes across the states. So future reforms and support mechanisms, it of course should ensure that there is fairness and balanced development across the states. Moving to the next topic, system of bail in India. So what is the context? Well, the Indian bail system is framed around the principle of bail, not jail. What does that mean? Bail is the rule and jail is the exception. Okay? Bail is the rule and jail is the exception. This is a fundamental legal tenet in India, okay, which asserts that pre-trial detention What is pre-trial detention? Of course, this means jail, right? We are detaining you before the trial has occurred. So, pre-trial detention or jail, this should only be ordered when absolutely necessary. Very important, absolutely necessary. That he will be jailed only when it is absolutely necessary, with bail, release on conditions being the standard procedure for accused individuals, okay? And this principle upholds the presumption of innocence, which says that unless and until the crime has been proven that it has been done by a particular person, he would not be considered guilty, which is innocent until proven wrong. So the principle of bail, not jail, basically it ensures constitutional rights like the liberty, okay, under Article 21, and it also enables accused persons to better prepare their defense. Now that we have understood the principle of bail, not jail, let's understand what is bail in the first place. It is the temporary release of a person from legal custody. Okay, and this is in exchange for a promise to appear in court for future proceedings. As mentioned earlier, it ensures that personal liberty, which is guaranteed by the Article 21 of the Constitution, is not arbitrarily curtailed. It is not arbitrarily curtailed, okay, before conviction. So you are not guilty, will not be considered guilty, okay, unless and until like it has been proven, okay, and then only once you are convicted, after that, and then only he'll be considered guilty. So section 2b of the Bharatiya Nagarika Suraksha Sanhita, BNSS 2023, that was passed, of course, it defines bail as a release of an accused person from custody under specific conditions, okay, upon executing a bond or bail bond. So of course there's a mechanism for it. So bail is given to a person, it is permitted for a person if that person meets those specific conditions. Now what are those specific conditions, or you can talk about the bail mechanism? So an accused basically signs a bond agreeing to bail terms and assures the court of his or her presence. So what are those? In the first place, it includes a cash deposit, okay, with the amount which is determined by the crime's nature and the accused's economic status as well. The deposit is forfeited if bail conditions are violated, but it is refunded upon trial conclusion. Now, if an accused cannot afford the cash, then courts may consider releasing them on a personal recognizance bond, and this requires them to arrange the cash within a specified period after release. Then the bail bond, okay, that is the surety. In this, another person provides a surety along with a specified payment, assuring the court that the accused will abide by all bail conditions. So these are the two bail mechanisms. Okay, one is cash deposit and another is the surety. Now what are the different types of bail? Okay, so Criminal law, it outlines various types of bail under Code of Criminal Procedure, okay, CRPC, and now CRPC we all know has been replaced. The CRPC 1973 is when it has been replaced by what? BNSS 2023. Okay, so what are the different types of bail? Bail in bailable offences. Okay, so section 478, very important, of the BNSS, it establishes a mandatory right to bail for bailable offences. Now there are certain offences that are bailable in nature, and it is mandatory for the court to grant bail in these cases. So court can refuse bail if the accused previously violated bail conditions. So of course, if the question is that the court cannot refuse, so since it is mandatory, no, the court can refuse. Okay, if there is an if, that if the bail conditions were violated earlier by that particular person. But other than that, if it is a bailable offence, then in that case the court grants bail. Then bail in non-bailable offences. This is under section 480 of BNSS. Okay, so it governs bail in non-bailable offences. There are certain offences in which usually the bail cannot be granted. Okay, and granting discretionary power to courts and police officers. So now, in non-bailable offences, case of non-bailable offences, the court has the discretion whether it wants to grant the bail or not. And exceptions allow for vulnerable categories, such as like there are certain persons, if a person is less than 16 years old, to give an example, then what will happen? Of course, these are the exceptions, and in these cases, even if the offence is non-bailable, then the court thinks about it and it can grant a bail. Then if it is a case of women or those who are sick, then in these cases the court can grant bail. Then anticipatory bail, very important, section 482 of the BNSS. Okay, so this basically grants anticipatory bail, which allows a person to seek bail before arrest for a non-bailable offence. So if the offence is non-bailable in nature, then also this person can seek a bail before arrest. But this is not applicable if the case is related to some sexual offence. Then there is something called statutory bail. Okay, so in this case, the accused person has a legal right to be released from custody if the investigating agency fails to file a charge sheet. Very important to note. If there is no charge sheet, then you have to release the person, okay, within the legally specified period. So these kind of cases are called default bail cases. Okay, then there is something called interim bail. Okay, in this the courts grant it temporarily while regular or anticipatory bail applications are pending. Then bail to under trial prisoners. Section 479 of BNSS, it mandates the release of an under trial prisoner on a personal bond if they have been detained for a period extending to 1/2 of maximum sentence for the offence. This basically means that an under trial prisoner, okay, a prisoner whose trial is not yet complete, okay, and on a personal bond, this particular person can be released if they have been detained for a period which extends to 1/2 of the maximum sentence for the offence. For instance, the maximum sentence for the offence is 4 years. Okay, so 2 years is half of the offence, right? So if more than 2 years that person has served the jail term and he or she is under trial, then in that case bail is mandatory. Now in this case, first time offenders must be released on bond if they have undergone detention for 1/3 of the maximum period of imprisonment. So if like the offenders are first time offenders, they are not like repeat offenders, then in that case 1/3, not half, okay, 1/3 if they have served, then of the maximum period of imprisonment for that particular offence, and they need to be released. Now there are certain cases in which the bail can be cancelled. Number one is misuse of liberty. Okay, they are in bail and they are misusing their liberty. They are doing something illegal, or they are like flying away from India even if they are not allowed to. So misusing their liberty, interferes with the investigation. Okay, if they have done something which is interfering with the investigation. Then tampers with evidence. Fourth is threatens witnesses, violates the conditions of the bail bond, and commits additional crimes or offences while on bail. So these are the conditions in which bail can be cancelled. So these are all important from prelims perspective. Now if we talk about the judicial interpretation related to bail, Supreme Court stated the principle, bail is the rule, jail is the exception, in the state of Rajasthan versus Balchand Balia case, okay, of 1977. That this you have to remember. Then in Arnesh Kumar versus state of Bihar of 2014 case this was, and the Supreme Court issued binding directions for mandatory preliminary inquiries and recording reasons for arrest to curb arbitrary arrests. We all know what happens arbitrarily. So to curb that, this was issued. Then in Nikesh Tarachand Shah versus Union of India 2017 case, the court struck down section 45 of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, which found it restrictive to twin conditions for bail, discriminatory and arbitrary, because it violated the Article 14 and 21 of the Constitution. Okay, then Sushila Agarwal case. These are the various cases that you can write while you are answering your mains paper, and then we'll talk about the challenges that are there in the bail system in India. So the first challenge is prolonged pre-trial detention, as mentioned earlier, right? So you're detaining without proper trial. So these are the keywords that you need to note down for your mains answers. Prolonged pre-trial detention. These are issues according to the India Justice Report 2025. Very important. Okay, about 76% of prisoners are under trials, and this disproportionately affects the poor and marginalized communities because they cannot afford lawyers, they cannot afford to defend themselves, and they also fail to meet bail conditions due to financial constraints. Also, the Law Commission report of 2017, it stated that granting or refusing bail based on monetary surety is contrary to constitutional ethos. Okay, if somebody is poor and cannot afford the cash amount, that means he or she would not be granted bail. So of course this is contrary to constitutional ethos, and it leads to discrimination and violates the fundamental right to a fair trial. In 2023, the Supreme Court issued guidelines regarding jail superintendents to inform the District Legal Services Authority if an accused remains in prison for over a week after bail. Then there are issues of arbitrary use of preventive detention laws, because there are certain laws like the National Security Act and the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. These acts allow for detention without even trial for national security reasons and public safety reasons, and these laws are criticized for a lack of judicial oversight, of course. Okay, because this can be misused also. So there are cases pertaining to that. Then there is delay in the judicial process, because slow judicial process is a major contributor to prolonged pre-trial detention that happens in India. Now, what are the reasons behind this? One is overburdened courts. Then infrastructure. Then inadequate legal resources. Right? These extend the cases for years and years. Okay, if we talk about the data, then as of July 2025, over 4.6 crore cases are pending in the lower courts. More than 63 lakh cases are pending in high courts, and over 86,000 cases are pending in Supreme Court. And this is according to the Ministry of Law and Justice itself. So we can understand the scenario that is there in India. The lack of uniformity in granting bail, because bail decision lies within the discretion of a judge. Thus, there is lack of uniformity and consistency in decisions, because the decision could be biased one. Also, there are numerous cases in which there is a misuse of anticipatory bail. We all know, because individuals from elite and political backgrounds, they misuse the right to anticipatory bail to protect themselves from arrest. For instance, we all know about the Arnab Goswami late night hearing case of 2020, right? So the Ministry of Home Affairs, it launched a number of schemes to give relief to the poor prisoners. For example, support to poor prisoners scheme. Then the National Crime Records Bureau is the central nodal agency of the scheme, and it mandates jail authorities to inform the district legal service authority if an under trial remains in jail 7 days after a bail order. So these are some of the steps that the government is taking, but of course we need more. For instance, we need to review and limit the misuse of preventive detention laws. Also, we need to introduce strict safeguards and mandate regular judicial review to prevent arbitrary detention. Also, we need to strengthen the bail accessibility, okay, because automatic bail for minor or non-violent offences should be there, and courts should grant bail based on risk assessment rather than financial ability. This is the major thing that needs a complete overhaul, okay. And there is a need for establishment of clear bail guidelines and ensure consistency and fairness in judicial discretion with transparent and objective criteria for bail refusal. Alternative forms of custody can also be explored. These include like house arrest, open prisons, electronic monitoring, and bail with conditions to reduce imprisonment. The government also needs to increase the number of courts in India, okay, introduce technology like AI and blockchain to enhance management and reduce case backlogs to minimize the pre-trial detention periods. And finally, we need to implement comprehensive bail legislation so that we streamline the entire process. We could draft a uniform and transparent process for granting or refusing bail and codify the current laws and practices so that there is harmonization of the entire process, and so that it aligns with the constitutional principles of liberty, dignity, and presumption of innocence while balancing victim rights and public safety at the same time. Moving to the next topic, PM SVANidhi Scheme. So recently the Union Cabinet restructured and extended the PM SVANidhi loan scheme for street vendors until March 31st, 2030. Okay. In the first place, we need to know what is PM SVANidhi Scheme. It is PM SVANidhi, it stands for PM Street Vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi. Okay. It is basically a micro credit facility which was launched by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs in 2020. Okay. So, micro credit facility for street vendors. So this is a central sector scheme, which means the central will be funding this scheme entirely, and it aims to integrate vendors into formal banking system to reduce their dependency on informal credit sources and then align with the vision of financial inclusion and Atmanirbhar Bharat. Okay. Now, what are the key provisions of the scheme? Okay, and this includes the recent updates also because recently it was restructured as mentioned earlier. Now, initially, what was the provision? Initially, in this scheme, it offered first loan of up to 10,000, okay, 10k, and this was repayable in monthly installments within a year. Now, upon timely repayment, the vendors would become eligible for subsequent loans of up to what? 20k and then 50,000, 50k. If they repay it on time, and no collateral, you don't have to give any collateral or security for these loans, and the scheme allows for early repayment without any penalty. Very important to note. And if we talk about the interest subsidy, then beneficiaries receive an interest subsidy of 7% per annum, which means whatever interest the person will pay, on that the government will give a subsidy of 7% on a yearly basis. Okay. And now, if we talk about the recent update of August 2025, then this initial 10k, okay, first loan of 10k, this has been increased to 15k. Okay, 20k has been increased to 25k, and the third phase where the loan would be given if there is a proper repayment on time, this has remained 50k only. So 15, 20 and 15, 25 and 50k. Now, it's important to note that beneficiaries who repay their second loan, which is of 25k, if they succeed in repaying that, then they'll receive a UPI linked RuPay credit card. Okay. And digital cashback incentive is also there, because vendors can up to rupees 1600 cashback for retail and wholesale digital transactions. This is just to introduce digital transactions to them so that they can be included in the digital transaction infrastructure. And as of July 2025, the government provided loans of around 13,797 crores to 68 lakh street vendors in India. So this was the data that was important. If we talk about the eligibility criteria, then street vendors were vending in urban areas on or before March 24, 2020, which was when the lockdown was announced on that date, right? So they are eligible. And if we talk about the recent update, so coverage has been expanded beyond statutory towns to census towns and peri-urban areas also in a graded manner. So it is not just the statutory towns or the urban areas. Now this has been expanded to census towns and the peri-urban areas as well. And also the eligibility verification occurs through a street vendor certification or identity card, which is issued by the urban local bodies. Okay, and vendors identified in surveys without such cards receive a provisional certificate as well. Vendors who are left out of the ULB surveys, then in that case, and who started their vending after the survey, they can also apply with a letter of recommendation from the town vending committee. Okay, if we talk about the implementation of and support for the scheme, then leading agencies like the microfinance institutions, NBFCs, that is the non-banking financial companies, okay, self-help groups, scheduled commercial banks and RRBs, that is regional rural banks, cooperative banks, they are all authorized to provide loans. And SIDB, that is the Small Industries Development Bank of India, it serves as the implementation partner of this scheme. So these were the things that were important from prelims perspective, and now we'll move on to the next topic. Moving on to the next topic, energy security in India. So it's an unstable world, and India's dependence on imported oil and gas, of course, it poses a significant national security risk. Okay, and that is why we need to develop reliable, affordable and indigenous sources of energy security. We all know what's happening. We import from Russia, and of course United States arm twists us. Okay, in fact, recently US imposed 50% tariffs on India by saying that it is doing so because India is importing energy requirements from Russia. So, and funding the Ukrainian war apparently, and that is why it imposed the tariffs. But Europe is also importing things from Russia and all. So those are not the real reasons, but here we will discuss about the energy security in India. So what is energy security? Energy security basically refers to the nation's ability to maintain a secure, reliable and affordable supply of energy for its people and economy. Okay, so what are the key aspects of energy security? One is availability, energy availability, then energy reliability, affordability and sustainability. Now, if we talk about the current status of India's energy sector, as of June 2025, the total power capacity, installed power capacity reached around 476 gigawatt by June 2025, and out of this installed capacity, thermal power, it accounts for 50.52%. And per capita electricity consumption has also increased, because in 2013-14 it was around 957 kilowatt per hour, and now it has increased to around 1395. India also achieved 100% village electrification by 2018. If we talk about the non-fossil fuel sources, it contributes about how much? 49% of the total capacity. Okay, as of June 2025, and India ranks 4th globally in renewable energy installed capacity. These facts and figures are very important from mains perspective. You can and even in prelims they can ask questions pertaining to this. India also ranks 4th in wind power and 3rd in solar power capacity, and the solar power capacity has increased to 110.9 gigawatt. Very important. Okay, and if we talk about the wind, it has increased to 51.3 gigawatt, and installed nuclear capacity, it grew to 8,780 megawatt across 25 reactors. Hydro capacity has also increased to around 48 gigawatt. So these are the facts and figures that you need to remember for mains and prelims. Now, what is the significance of India's energy security? India is the world's 3rd largest energy consumer. but still it imports a lot of energy, and it is heavily dependent on imports. And dependence on foreign sources, it exposes India to vulnerabilities that are happening right now, such as supply disruption and price volatility. It affects the economy and the national security completely. And large import bills, these are not good for the economy, because it strains the economy by increasing the what? Trade deficit. Trade deficit. We are importing more and exporting less, right? Then it increases the subsidies, it fuels subsidies, and it increases the fiscal burden. Okay, more expenditure and less revenue for the government. When a country relies on external sources for energy supplies, it becomes vulnerable to political pressure as well. What is happening in the case of US and India? Okay, geopolitical tensions also, and these influence foreign policy choices. So energy dependence directly weakens India's strategic autonomy. Now, the government of India has launched a number of initiatives. For instance, the first one is the PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana. It was launched in 2024, and the target is to provide 1 crore households with free electricity through rooftop solar systems. And this will add around 30 gigawatt capacity of solar capacity and generate 1 lakh crore units over 25 years. That is the goal. PM Kusum scheme, it aims to add around 34.8 gigawatt of solar capacity, and it wants to support farmers with standalone solar pumps. Okay, so it envisages to solarize the existing grid connected agricultural pumps and solar power plants on agricultural land. Then the National Green Hydrogen Mission, launched in 2023. Okay, so the aim is to, of course, increase the renewable power energy capacity. Then there is Strategic Petroleum Reserves, SPR. So the government, through Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserve Limited, it has established strategic reserves. Okay, and these facilities are there in 3 locations: Visakhapatnam, Mangaluru and Padur. Okay, so in these reserves the government will store petroleum. Okay, and then global energy assets, so investments in oil and gas assets across countries like Brazil, Venezuela, Russia and Vietnam. Of course, we need to invest in these things, and we are doing so. We are also trying to boost domestic exploration and production, because we have launched initiatives like the Open Acreage Licensing Program, OALP, to boost investments in oil and gas exploration, and also enhance the domestic energy output. Then there is PLI scheme, Production Linked Incentive Scheme, which supports domestic manufacturing of solar modules and advanced chemistry cell batteries. International cooperation is also there, because energy diplomacy is going on through bilateral and multilateral agreements. There are organizations like the IEA, International Energy Agency, then the International Atomic Energy Agency. All these focus on energy cooperation, investment promotion and technology transfer. Now, there are a lot of challenges in India's energy security arena. Okay, first is import dependency, because India imports of over 85% of its crude oil and more than 50% of its natural gas. Over 25% of total import bill in 2024 was from this only, and it did put pressure on rupee, it inflated the trade deficit, and it of course compromises on the macroeconomic stability of the country. Then strategic imbalance, because India's reliance on Russia for around 35 to 40% of its crude imports, up from 2% before the Ukrainian war. It highlights the vulnerability of single sourced reliance. So we need to do what? Diversify, not substitution, and this defines what? True sovereignty. Global market volatility, because of course we all know what is happening. Russia-Ukraine war is going on, Gaza crisis is going on. So because of these geopolitical conflicts, what will happen if we cannot import from these countries? Okay, and then there is international sanctions also. We all know what US does. It did with Iran, JCPOA. Then it of course imposed tariffs on India because of our dependency on a lot of energy security. It is because of Russia. It comes from Russia, and this caused sharp fluctuations in global oil prices, and of course it impacts India's oil import bill also, fiscal balance and foreign exchange reserves. So financing needs for energy transition. So according to the International Energy Agency, IEA, India requires around $160 billion per year to meet its energy transition goals by 2070, because we want to go to net zero by 2070, right? Now, domestic capital inflows alone are insufficient, and we require external private sector funding and foreign direct investment for that. Okay, then there's of course rising energy demand, because energy demand is increasing because of the increase in population, economic growth, urbanization and industrialization. And of course, according to various reports, by 2040 India's energy requirements is projected to double. So we need to it will definitely increase imports if domestic production cannot keep pace with it. Renewable energy intermittency is there, because renewable energy sources like solar and wind, they pose challenges due to their inherent variability, uncertainty. Okay, monsoon season is there, then wind is not constant, so that is an issue. And it requires continuous balance to maintain grid stability. Infrastructure gaps, of course, because storage options for excess renewable capacity is not there, it has not been developed. So if we generate renewable energy quickly, at the same time if we don't create infrastructure for storing that energy, where will it go? It will lead to definitely market stabilization issues. Okay, so modernizing the power sector is essential, but to meet increasing energy needs, we also need to ensure that there is affordability, reliability, and we have to explore the storage options as well. Inadequate strategic petroleum reserves, because limited buffer against supply disruptions. Coastal concentration makes them susceptible to attacks and natural disasters. So we have to think about that also strategically. Access to critical inputs, because securing critical minerals like lithium is challenging due to its geographical concentration. So these are the issues that are going on right now. India also depends on imported machinery, okay, leading to dependence on foreign suppliers for spare parts and technical support. These are the ongoing issues. So what is the way forward? Of course, we need to diversify energy sources and supplies. We need to reduce our dependency on any single source or supplier by promoting alternative fuels. We also need to increase our sourcing from various global regions like Africa, US, then the Latin America, and secure the supply of critical minerals to international corporations. Okay. We also need to unlock our indigenous energy. We need to utilize coal reserves to produce syngas, methanol, hydrogen and fertilizers through technological advancements in gasification and carbon capture. So in this way we can overcome other issues like lack of sources, right? Then expand biofuel potential, because ethanol blending program reduces crude imports and it transfers a lot of amount to the farmers, foreign exchange savings, etc. In a nutshell, domestic production of clean energy technologies, particularly the solar photovoltaics or wind turbines and lithium ion batteries, this will reduce our import dependency. Okay. With this, we come to an end of this discussion. Thank you so much.